Hello, good afternoon. We are going to look at some more strategies, the strategies for teaching learning. Probably we are going to start with the two uh, strategies which are very common to us. These two strategies are very much closely related to the teaching learning, concept and generalization that we have already practiced in this skill. So, what is inductive strategy? When we try to understand what is inductive and the deductive, we have to understand the concept and the examples. We knew in the skills there is a concept, and through the concept we try to generalize the concept. So here what we have to understand is inductive and deductive strategy is a method of teaching where we use examples first, or we use a principle first, explain the process and the examples comes later. So in order to look at that, let's look at the second slides. In the second slide, you have seen that if we begin with the observation of certain patterns and form a certain hypothesis and generalize at the end, such kind of such process is called inductive reasoning. The inductive reasoning is that you have to begin with an example, look at the examples, and then look at the patterns, and then describe the examples, and then finally we try to generalize it. This is what exactly we have done with the concept and generalization. So similar to that, even in the teaching strategy, we can always bring an examples, start with the examples, show them examples, and allow the student to understand the examples, and then look at the patterns, and then form their hypothesis, and finally give a theory of that. That is called generalization. Or else it goes with the other way around. When it's in deductive, you start with the theory, hypothesis, then observation and confirmation, and this we are going to see in the next as a next strategy. Alright, when there is a deductive and inductive, just look at that. In case of deductive, the generalizations or the rule come first, and then specific examples of the activity comes later. In case of inductive, the specific examples and then activities comes first, and based on the observation, based on our hypothesis, we try to generalize it and form a certain rules, and this is called inductive. So we are on the inductive methods. So in the inductive methods, we often start with an example. Please understand that we start with examples. So let us look at what is this inductive strategy. Inductive strategy is a process of reasoning through which generalization is arrived at. A process in which we try to looking at the examples, we try to reason out, we try to formulate hypothesis, and then finally we try to generalize it, and that is what we call inductive process. It is also a process that allows the student to observe specifics and then arrive at a generalizations, and it is also a strategy used by a teacher when they present a data or situation, then ask the students to infer the generalization. Very well we know that whenever we try to teach some kind of an statistic related subjects like number of people or the number different pattern of disease, probably teachers try to show the data, and then students try to interpret the data and finally generalize it. So this is one of the methods of teaching. So it is a strategy that promotes learning through inductive reasoning, where the skills of observation, comparing, classifications and classifyings are used to arrive at the generalizations or the definitions. So it is a strategy where teacher can use some examples and allow the students to look at and observe the examples and form certain pattern in it, and try to compare and contrast and arrive to some conclusions and form a definition, and that is what you call inductive strategy. The principle of inductive strategies are: Inductive strategy involves teaching and learning of abstract ideas, concepts, law, rules, formula, and generalizations. It also helps the teachers to promotes learning through discovery, teaching. So probably teachers give a few examples and then the student try to explore more. So that is what it means. It is guided a rules process, which means the examples and generalization. First, they have to begin with their learning has to begin with the teachers has to provide an opportunity with a lot of examples, and followed by the inference or the interpretations of a data or inference of the observation, and finally the students has to define it or they generalize it. That is what you call ek means examples, rule, or the process or generalization. So inductive strategy follows ek rule process. It also helps the student. Sorry, it also helps the teachers to motivate the students through interactions. Since here they'll have to look at the examples and then talk, discuss, and then here it's mostly often whenever you are trying to share an ideas or the of a certain making some kind of inference of a particular observation, then teachers try to use such methods. Let's look at different phases of the inductive methods, different phases, how this method can be used, how this method or this strategy can be used in our teaching learning. First, number one, open-ended phase. In the open-ended phase, students are shown examples of the concept, alright? Few examples are brought in by the teachers. Students are asked to observe the examples and describe it. They look at the few examples and look at how they are, they have a different patterns. They try to infer those examples, predict that examples, their patterns, predict their patterns. So students are also shown non-examples so that they are very clear about it, so that they are able to bring more examples. Again, students are asked to observe and describe the non-examples. These are somewhat like an concept and generalizations, but here it is not that teachers use a certain technique. They can bring in and then allow the student to discuss. Student, they do themselves discussing more examples and non-examples, right? And then finally students are encouraged to compare and examples and non-examples, finding their similarities and differences. Now the second phase is a conversion phase. Previously, for phase one was an open phase where the students are given an examples, non-examples by the teachers, and the students are allowed, given an opportunity to add more examples. Coming to the phase two, where each student has to now come to, try to converge their ideas, bring closer. The ideas has to come closer. Students are promoted to identify the similar patterns, characteristics, common salient features of the critical attributes of an example. So in this phase, students are allowed to look at critically the similarities and differences, not differences, similarities of those examples, and try to state all those, every example's character must be stated out neatly, and then compare with all the examples. Phase 3, closer phase, where the students are encouraged to arrive at a generalization. So basing that characters or the salient features or the patterns, the student would be able to tell something which about those objects. Therefore, they will be able to define it. So final phase is now the application phase, where the students are encouraged to apply the definitions, generalizing by finding more examples. So since they have defined the examples, they are able to arrive to a definition. Therefore, now they should be able to tell some more examples through that definitions. by using that definition. All right. So, for example, these are some of the open-ended. If you take it as a class, example of and lessons, probably in the open phase. This is an example of an English, where you will see here examples and non-examples of assault, and then non-example is love. So teachers gives in another example, sugar and joy. And now if you look at these two examples, I think they will be able to list more. So this is how the students actually share the ideas, and now they write in critical characters of this and character of this, non-examples and example. Then finally, looking at that, they are able to define it. This is a convergent ideas, because they were trying to look at the critical characters of an examples, and they try to try to define that all those ideas. So closure phase, see that teachers allow the students to define it. All right, after definition, then there are students should be able to share you more examples. Here the only differences is in case of concept and generalization, teachers try to be play through his actions, and then should be able to through the teacher's verbal instructions as well as through his bodily actions, should be able to bring out the similar lessons. But however, here teachers can be well prepared and plan to bring in examples where there is teachers either can write on the board, teacher can bring then all the examples. There we said teachers has to put an examples through, try to dig out, and the way teachers try to dig out the examples brings in concept. The way here teachers bring an example, allow the students to actually find out as similar patterns, and then trying to infer and give a greater observations of each examples are some of the methods they use here. So here students actually develop more skills of observations and inference and predictions, so data analysis, whereas in the case of concept in general that doesn't happen. Therefore this is an strategy where students have a more option to learn on their own. All right, this is all for the inductive methods. Hope you have understood. If you have any questions, we'll discuss in the class. Thank you. Next we are going to discuss the deductive methods.